Well, I didn't see that coming. I got 100 clips. Ninja, I'm in New York. I got 100 clips. Ninja, I'm in New York. Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia. Relocated. Everybody thought the fight was going to be in Las Vegas, but the fight is going to the Barclays Center in New York. This, according to Oscar, I do believe, De La Hoya, the Golden Boy himself, in a brand new tweet. Marvelous. The Golden Boy himself, Oscar De La Hoya, took to his social media and he tags Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia. The tweet says, Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney will be live on DAZN Boxing from the, get this, from the Barclays Center, promoted by Golden Boy Promotions, 4/20/2024. So all the smokers, smoke on that. Now, this is a bit of a shocker. Most people and all the sources, all the media that I seen personally, they were all under the impression that Devin Haney versus Ryan Garcia was going to take place on the West Coast, West Side, in Las Vegas, Nevada. And now we find out that is not the truth. And this is coming from Oscar De La Hoya. Do not shoot the messenger. You guys see it on the screen. I showed it throughout this video. He's saying the fight on 4/20 is now taking place in New York. Very interesting. The Barclays Center, they haven't really had a bunch of fights recently. Like the Barclays Center, they had to deal with PBC initially, and it was popping during that time. I personally covered a ton of PBC fights at the Barclays Center. But then I believe the Barclays Center, they got new management or whatever the case was. And then I think that deal ran out or whatever with PBC. So you didn't see as many fights or just boxing in general in that specific location. It's a very nice venue. I've been there. It's the newer venue in terms of the Nassau Coliseum. I believe that's in Long Island. You got, of course, the older building, MSG, Madison Square Garden. And then the Barclays is the newest out of that. So Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia will take place on the East Coast, not the West Coast. Now, my personal opinion, I live in California, Bay Area to be exact. I'm in Northern California. So I'm kind of bummed out because I thought the fight was going to be in the West Coast, in Las Vegas. So for me, that's just easier. It's just overall an easier trip. New York is 5 hours, whatever. So me personally, I would have preferred it on the West Coast. But aside from my own selfish needs, I really kind of feel like the fight makes more sense on the West Coast. Here's why. Ryan Garcia is from California. He's from Victorville. Devin Haney was born in the Bay Area, and then he migrated to Vegas, I think Henderson or whatever, with his family, with his pops. And, you know, he resides in Vegas. So Vegas being a tourist town, Devin Haney having roots there, you know, basically his second home, West Coast, and Ryan Garcia being a West Coast fighter, for me personally, it seemed like Vegas was the ticket. So when all the reports were suggesting the fight would take place in Vegas, that kind of made sense. You know, Devin Haney being a West Coast fighter and Ryan Garcia being a West Coast fighter. And even if you didn't do it in Vegas particularly, I think Los Angeles seems like another rightful place. But anytime you're dealing with boxing, you're dealing with potential egos. So the fact that it's a big fight and Devin Haney resides in Vegas, you know, who's to say maybe Ryan Garcia didn't like the idea of it happening where Devin Haney does all his sparring, Devin Haney, you know, his second home. Maybe he felt that gives Devin Haney an advantage. And then the same thing for Los Angeles. Los Angeles is closer to Victorville, where Ryan Garcia is from. So if the fight were to happen in Los Angeles, then maybe Devin Haney as the champion, the WBC champion, as you see right here, maybe he's like, nah, that's pretty much Ryan's turf. So I don't want the fight there. So maybe in the negotiation process, they negotiated a place like the East Coast where neither guy is from, that has a big market for boxing, and it's more neutral territory. So for that, if that was even the reason, that kind of makes sense, because New York would be neutral for two West Coast guys, as opposed to Los Angeles or Vegas. As I just mentioned, you could make the argument that or even like Devin Haney's last fight was in the Bay Area. I was there for that particular last fight. Then, maybe Ryan Garcia doesn't want to fight Devin Haney in San Francisco, at the Chase Center again. So Regis Prograis, I'm actually surprised that him as the WBC champion at the time, I'm surprised that he actually agreed to that, because he was the champion and he could have put up a fight, but he agreed to it and he got schooled by Devin Haney. So I don't know what this is all my opinion, and this is just my conjecture and dialogue. I do not know what the actual reason for the location switch, because again, it was reported that this fight was going to take place in Vegas. It could be one of those things that I mentioned earlier, or it also could have been none of those things. It could have been something as simple as this fight is happening in about 9 weeks. So with that, there were other options for fights that were on the table. Devin Haney, his mandatory is Sandor Martin. You had Devin Haney and Ryan, who had earlier negotiations. Then those negotiations broke up, and Ryan said he was going to pursue Rolando Romero, who was a champion in the 140-pound division. He said he was going to target him instead, because he talked to Floyd Mayweather or something when they were jogging, and he said that Floyd Mayweather brought up a good point, like, why don't you fight Rolly? He has a belt, and then you increase your leverage, and then you go back to the Devin Haney fight thereafter, which did make sense. But then Rolly announced that he was fighting Aesop Pitbull Cruz. De La Hoya says that Rolly and Pitbull Cruz priced themselves out, so Ryan was left with no dance partner, and Devin Haney had already gotten left by Ryan Garcia, so those two got back in negotiations and made the fight, which is a good fight for boxing. So by the time all of these things happened, all this negotiation and, negotiation one with Ryan and Devin, and then Ryan tweeted that he's going to fight against Rolly, and then he was negotiating with him for a period of time, and then that didn't work. And then Ryan posted that he was going to fight Rolly, and everything was finalized. And then Rolly, 12 hours later, posted he's fighting Pitbull Cruz on the Keith Thurman Tim Tszyu card. So that's a lot of action and like moving parts that is going on with negotiations that elapsed over the span of weeks, months, or whatever. So it could have been something as simple as, by the time all that was had, all these discussions, maybe Vegas booked up, because you have to think about it. April 20th, there could be other things in Vegas, because you have to understand, a place like Vegas is a tourist capital. They have so many opportunities to partner with the J-Lo's and the Taylor Swifts and the David Copperfields and Drakes and Ushers, and different entertainers have residencies and all these types of things. They're trying to make their money, so they're trying to book up and fill their calendar for the remaining year. So if they can break bread with Usher on 420, or Chingy, it was word how we met, huh? She was with her, or whatever the person is, like some kind of festival or R&B concert with Keith Sweat. Now what your body? Then they're going to do that. They're not going to sit around and wait for boxing to have negotiations, and then they could have booked that date with a hockey game or some gymnastics tournament or whatever, and they sitting up here waiting for boxers and their teams and negotiations. So maybe Vegas was booked up by the time that was said and done. I don't really know. but it is what it is. So the fight is taking place in New York. Some people will be happy with it because they live on that coast, and this is a good fight with Devin Haney, with Ryan Garcia, so it makes it more accessible. The other good thing, if you live in that region or you're prepared to travel to New York, is the mere fact that New York, I feel like they've been looked over recently for boxing. From Wilder Fury 2 and 3, you look at David Benavidez and Caleb Plant. You look at David Benavidez versus Andrade. You look at Canelo's recent fights. We're talking about Canelo Charlo. We're talking, most of Canelo Bivol, even when he was with DAZN, right? Tank Davis versus Ryan. All these fights took place pretty much on the West Coast. And I'm enjoying it because I'm a West Coast dude. You know what I mean? So I don't have a problem with it. But for the sake of keeping things like kind of balanced, this is the first time New York is getting a fight of this size in quite some time. And I'm not going to like name drop a bunch of fights, but they just haven't. Like Top Rank's done some shows out there in New York and things like that. But I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about a fight that people are anticipating with two big personalities and one loss between the two fighters. Devin Haney's a champion. Ryan Garcia, he did lose to this man you see on the screen, Gervonta Tank Davis, but he's moved up in weight since, collected a win versus Oscar Duarte. So all in all, this is good for the East Coast fight fans because they've been kind of starved, if you will, of major fights. Speaking of Gervonta Tank Davis, aka Abdul Wahid, I would be remiss in this video if I did not add this. One thing that's interesting about the relocation, we'll say, the fight with Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia was thought to be in Las Vegas on the West Coast. Now with Oscar De La Hoya, who is the promoter, which, stay tuned, I got some things to say about that. With Oscar De La Hoya confirming its new and current and actual location, the Barclays Center. One thing that is very interesting is that location, like I said, hasn't received many big fights. The last fight that I can recall that was big, that did numbers and had boxing's ears and had boxing's eyes, was Gervonta Davis. So I must mention that in this video. Boom. It says a big crowd turned out to the Barclays Center to watch Gervonta Tank Davis fight, and they were rewarded with a highlight reel knockout. On Saturday night, the Davis versus Rolly Premier Boxing Champions event at the Barclays Center broke the record for the highest grossing boxing show in the arena's history, according to the event organizers. They announced, pay special attention. I give you guys all the details, so it's up to you to subscribe to the channel because I'm the best in the business and it's not even close. Subscribe for all of your boxing news. Not a bunch of clickbait, reliable, accurate information and opinions you can take to the bank. So pay attention to this. And I need you guys to pay attention. Tank versus Rolly PBC fight at the Barclays Center broke the record for the highest grossing show in the arena's history, according to event organizers. They announced 18,970 attendance number, which also set a new record for boxing in the arena. So Tank Davis did this 2 years ago. He fought Rolly a little bit after the pandemic, and he fought him in the Barclays Center in New York. Rolly only had 14 fights. He literally he wasn't a big name. I think Rolly has since gotten bigger since he fought Tank Davis, even though he lost that fight and he was knocked out. But the point I'm making is Rolando Rolly Romero wasn't a big name. In fact, again, he only had 14 fights. And one of those fights, people were annoyed with the outcome, similar to a fight that happened after, which was Ishmael Barroso. But that's a whole nother video, a whole nother story. But even when leading into the Tank fight, some people were mad because they thought that Rolly really didn't beat Jackson Marinez, and they thought it was a robbery, right? So Gervonta Davis and Rolly were able to sell you a fight. Initially, it had 2 press conferences. The first press conference was in LA, and Rolly then had legal trouble. He was under investigation. I'm not going to go into detail about that investigation in this video. You guys can Google it and see what that was about. Rolly beat the case. The investigation was dropped. Rolly was forced to pull out of the fight because Showtime, at the time, they were in boxing, and they deemed that it wasn't a good look to proceed with the fight due to that investigation. So Rolly and Tank were already supposed to fight, but the fight got messed up with that investigation, which Rolly later beat. And Tank ended up fighting Esau Pitbull Cruz, and he beat him as well. Then they rescheduled the Rolly fight when things cleared up for Rolly Romero, and he knocked out Rolly. But again, with all of this stuff, I'd have to give you guys the chronological order. Now, if you guys subscribe to my channel, you will remember these things because I go over them on a daily basis. It's up to you guys to subscribe if you want the knowledge. So the point I'm making is that Tank Davis was able to fight a guy like Rolly, who only had 14 fights. He had, the first fight had initially gotten messed up with the investigation. He had the Jackson Marinez controversy, and Tank and Rolly sold the heck out of the fight and entertained you. Now, the thing that's interesting with that being said is Ryan has since lost to Tank Davis himself as well. Tank dropped him and stopped him, and Tank got a knockout in the Ryan fight. He got a knockout in the Rolly fight. You have Devin Haney, who's about to fight Ryan Garcia, and he's fighting him in the same venue where Tank broke records with a guy like Rolly Romero. Devin Haney is the WBC champion, so it's a title fight, and he's not fighting a guy that's has the profile that Rolly had at the time. He has Ryan Garcia as a dance partner. People are going to compare those numbers. Whenever the live gate comes out from Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia, remember this video. Remember Boxingego said it, because Tank in that same building, he broke records. So it's going to be pressure to see, Devin Haney, can he close the show? Can he get a stoppage? Because people were thoroughly entertained with Rolly when Rolly got knocked out, in the Tank fight. So basically Tank, this is what I told you. Tank has a style where he can box, where he can bang, and it separates him from anybody in boxing in or around his division because he knows how to close the show. Teofimo is so iffy, if you will, when it comes to boxing. Like, he'll put up a good performance and he'll look good versus Josh Taylor, but then he'll put up a performance like Jermaine Ortiz or Sandor Martin. He can't close the show. He can't stop him. He can't drop him, things like that. Tank, more often than not, he's closing the show and he's putting on entertaining action fights. In fact, only 2 guys have survived Gervonta Davis. So it's going to be some pressure on Devin Haney in that regard. Devin Haney is about Ryan Garcia's size. He's the champion. People think he has a lot more skills. I mean, he does have more skills, but then Ryan's dangerous with his left hook, primarily his power, things like that. But these numbers are going to be compared to what Gervonta Davis did 2 years ago with a guy like Rolly, because this is considered a great fight. New York hasn't gotten a lot of big fights, so I'm interested. I'm interested in the fight. I'm curious kind of why they moved it to New York. I don't know at this point of me recording the video, and I'm curious to see what the numbers are financially and the outcome of the fight, of course. So should be a good one, but it's no longer going to be on the West Coast. It will be at the Barclays Center in New York. Going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. Now, if you're struggling to keep up with boxing, this one thing is going to solve your problem, and that's hitting the subscribe button and checking out this next video on YouTube. The future is now. The Hybernation 5s by Kenichi Bear. Hybrid gaming and lifestyle headphones. Out of the box, you can connect to any console or PC. Bluetooth ready with a low latency USB adapter, color RGB, and extreme bass mode. The Hybernation 5s adjust to you. Whether you need a gaming, travel, gym, or lifestyle headphones, the Hibernations got you covered. The new Hybernation 5s, link in the description. Customize the way you hear the world. Welcome to the nation.